G'day and welcome to Abernethy Brothers Brewing. Today we're going to be brewing a Gose. It's an old German style beer. It's got a slightly salty profile. A number of Goses have, modern Goses I should say, have some kind of fruit or other kind of flavour profile to them. We were going to brew a passion fruit Gose, but my supplier of passion fruits dried up, so we tried something different. I was actually at a gin distillery, and the juniper berry flavour is obviously very predominant with gin, so I thought, why not do a Gose using juniper berries? So that's what we did. Stick around. So here's the recipe for the Juniper Berry Gose. It's a 25 litre batch, my normal batch. You'll see the specs in the middle of the page here. I've deliberately gone dry here. This is part of both the mashing temp, but also using 3 packs of the Philly Sour. I want it to finish pretty crisp, and likewise with the EBC, I'm really wanting this to be pretty blonde. So outside of Pils the malt, I haven't had any colour at all. So the IBU's 7, which is pretty low as per the style. So moving down, we've got 2.1 kilos of Wyman Pilsner, 2.1 of wheat malt. We've got 200 of acidulated malt. I'm wanting to get the mash pH down low. And I've chucked in some dextrose, 100 grams there. That was a result of some feedback, not only looking at the Lullermond Philly Sour, what do you call it? They did a thing, it's on the web if you want to look it up. It gives you a bit of a hints and tips kind of video. It is a bit dry, but does give you some good information. Also, thanks to Stas from Stas Brewing, who gave me this tip as well. I've used Mandarina Bavaria for hops. Like, there's only 10 grams in this. There's next to no IBUs, and to be honest, I used this because I had it in stock. That's probably about all, really. I have added some brewing salts. You'll see calcium chloride, Epsom, gypsum here. We've got 40 grams of juniper at flame out, and also 15 grams of salt, and I'm going to add that directly to the keg actually when I'm obviously kegging. I'm going to use 3 packs of the Philly Sour. The instructions or recommendations were to maximise the souring potential, to have it up in that 1.5 grams per litre pitching rate, and given there's about 11 grams in each pack, I'm using 3 packs, close enough to the 25 litre batch that I'm brewing. Might be a touch more when it gets in the fermenter. The mash profile is pretty straightforward, 65 for 60 minutes, and then a mash out at 75. I do have written on the screen here, primary fermentation at 20 degrees. I'm actually going to increase that. Again, just some feedback from Stas Brewing, as well as looking at a few others. I'm going to bump that up a little bit. It'll probably be about 24 degrees. Right, so Santa Claus bought me a scale this year, quite a large base, just eBay digital readout. You can hang on a hook, so now I can use a tub, do most of my graining. Before I was using a small scale that only really fitted a small dish. You've probably seen it on a previous video, so now I can use the tub and save a bit of time. Okay, as I outlined in the recipe, this has a fair bit of wheat in it, this batch. There's 2.3 kilos to be exact. I haven't used that much wheat before in a brew, so we will use some rice hulls just to improve the sparge. It's also the first time we've used acidulated malt. With the very pale malts in this batch, the pH seemed to be going to be quite high, so I'm going to use a combination of a kilo of acidulated malt, Wyman's, but then also put in some citric acid to drop down the pH to hopefully in that 5.2 category. Okay, I don't know if you could see when I was tipping it in, I doubt it, but the wheat grains are a lot smaller than the barley. So I contemplated, do I change the gap on the mill? And the acidulated malt and the wheat malt were actually in the same bag, so I couldn't actually separate those, or not fully at least. So I'm just curious, I'm just going through here to see if the wheat is crushed. That's a pretty good crush, I reckon. I can't see any wheat grain at all that's not cracked. I did, oh, there was one, yeah, small wheat grain. I did use the drill at a higher speed than I would normally use when just doing a barley crush. Oh no, that's cracked. Yeah, so anyway, I'm pretty happy with that as a crush. We'll see how it flows. As I said, I'll chuck in some rice hulls just to help with lautering when we get to the sparge. Okay, I've never used dextrose in a beer before, to be honest, or not since uni days anyway, when you had you chuck in a can of sugar. But in researching the Philly sour yeast, feedback was to use some dextrose because it initiates early fermentation and gives it a better chance of creating more sour flavour. So I backed off the Pilsner malt that I had in the recipe in a similar way that I saw Stas do it, and adding in 100 grams of dextrose to produce that early fermentation. Oh, let's turn the scale on first, eh? With the mash today, there's obviously quite a bit of wheat in this recipe, so I'm using rice hulls, but I've often found when I've used rice hulls, the absorption rate of the grain, the wet grain, increases, and my overall volume at the end of the sparge tends to drop away. So I heard of a number of people actually soaking the rice hulls in a bit of water. So I'm going to use that in the mash today. It also helps with removing some of the dust particles that are in the bags of rice hulls. So we'll put that in. I'll chuck in a handful with every couple of scoops of grain, and we'll mix it into the mash before we get underway. Okay, we're halfway through the mash. Really happy with this. I added in quite a bit of rice hulls. You saw that when I was mashing in, and the flow through the grain bed was very good. You can see it's not coming up over the overflow even. So yeah, pretty good with that. Alright, so here we have it. Juniper berries. You know, gin. Alright. You're going to see this. They look kind of like, yeah, large peppercorns, I suppose. Focus. Yeah, so what I've done is I've ground up the juniper berries and I've put them in a hop sock. Just put this in a food processor, so it's quite fine. Pretty strong aroma actually, and when they're like this you can definitely smell gin. Okay, here are the additions I went through earlier. 30-minute addition. It's 10 grams of Mandarina Bavaria. No, what is it? It's not Mandarina Bavaria, is it? It is Mandarin Bavaria, look at that. I should trust myself on the first time. 10 grams at 30 minutes. We're only after 7 IBUs in this batch. Really not looking for much bittering at all. Good old used nutrient and wool flock, and this is the Dextrose, which is going in at 10 minutes to go. Righto, now in with the Dextrose. I'm just going to do this a little bit at a time, I think, and stir. I'm just using a little bit of the hot water to dissolve. I was quite full before so I tipped some in there, as you saw. Just get some hot water. Very conscious of the sugar just dropping to the bottom and burning on the element. Now, given how quickly that was dissolving, I highly doubt that would happen, but you do it just to be sure. Cheers. Righto, into the transfer. We're going to check the final gravity. Now this is after the addition of the dextrose that you saw, so I am expecting a bit more of a bump in gravity from the pre-boil. Obviously you've got the evaporation loss, which will increase it, as well as the dextrose. So let's see where we wound up. Righto, the yeast, Philly sour. Philly sour. There you go. So I'm not a massive sour guy, but I do like a Gose, and that's part of the reason, obviously, for brewing this particular brew. I saw this on YouTube if you guys were reviewing it. I didn't want to necessarily go through the whole kettle sour process, so I thought I'll give this a go. It does say on the packet 0.5 to 1 gram per litre is the pitching rate, but I did watch the video, the Lolomon video about the particular yeast, and they did indicate, you know, a pitching rate of about 1.5 grams per litre in order to maximise the souring potential of the beer. So I'm just going to check the final volume that I wind up getting in the fermenter. Each one of these packets is 11 grams. So if I go 1.5 grams per litre, which was what was indicated on the YouTube video, which is not what's written on the pack, that means 3 packs of this. So I'm just going to give it a go. They do say it's slower in terms of lag phase and overall fermentation in the order of 10 days. But I'll throw the 3 in, see what happens. How can we lose? Righto, final step. So I wound up with 26 litres in the fermenter. So that would equate, if it was 1.5 grams a litre, that'd be what, 39? I got 33. I'll work out exactly what the pitching rate is and I'll put that here. But it's not quite going to be 1.5, but it's going to be more than 1. Alright, so I'll ferment that at 23 degrees. We'll see how it goes. This one's called, they've brought forth Juniper berries. Gose. So usually we like to leave it at serving pressure for 2 weeks to get its full carbonation, but this one seems to have uptaken pretty well after just 1. So if it does die off a little bit, that's generally the reason why. I think it's pretty good. It looks pretty good. We're not a massive sour fan, don't get me wrong. I'll give you a close up. So it does have the traditional slightly cloudy GOSE profile. It is here's off in the recipe. There's quite a bit of wheat in this.
Yep.
Probably 45% or something of that nature. But
finished out at 4.3.
4.3, yes. So, fairly sour yeast, does it sour?
Yes.
It sours. That is and we're not a big sour fan.
Well,
so
I quite like them. Like if you have one really squirting the ice out, it's like, well, that's interesting, but it's like a little sampler. This is extremely nice.
It's just the right level of sour, and I mean, they definitely. We fermented warm, which we looked at the Lullerman guidelines 24. I'll correct that on the screen if my memory doesn't serve me correct. So that's as warm as we've ever fermented. Interesting fermentation profile. It took a while before
it kicked on.
Yeah. So the lag phase was at least 36 hours. It might have been longer before there was any activity at all in the airlock or the Krausen. And I know that's not the
end all.
We did have the tilt in there, so there was no change in gravity at all for that period of time. But
do we have a snapshot of the tilt graph? Maybe we could possibly put that somewhere there.
It's I'm pretty impressed.
Yeah, this is a nice,
pretty impressed.
A nice kickback.
Yep,
that's
Yep.
So
just the right amount of salt.
Yes,
we put in 15 grams. We put it straight in the keg. We didn't put it in the boil or the. It went in the keg, diluted in a small amount of boiled water.
Yep.
Straight in the keg, and it's
done perfect.
You know, I can be bloody critical on beers. Like, I want them to be awesome, every one of them.
Well,
and I tell you what, as a first start for this style, jeez, it's bloody close, isn't it?
And there's that subtle. What is that in the background? But that is the juniper berries there. It's definitely there. It's definitely there.
Yeah. It's just that slight hint.
Yep.
But there you go. That's the They've bought for juniper berries. Thank you for watching.
Cheers.
Subscribe, like.
Yeah.